Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Balabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Balabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Jasaranandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunda Vihari Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunda Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Vihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktavinda ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Deutsch oder Englisch? Everybody speaks English? Eva. Wer versteht kein, oder alle, who doesn't understand German? Okay, 3, so we'll Deutsch. No, English wins. English wins. Wer will, wo ist Deutsch? Kannst du das Deutsch nach hinten geben? For Eva. Eva, da. Eva. So we're reading from the Bhagavad Gita. We're reading from the introduction. Bharatamrita sarvasam Vishnu bhaktrad vinishritam Gita gangodakam pitva Punarjanma na vidyate. One who drinks the water of the Ganges attains salvation. So what to speak of one who drinks the nectar of the Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is the essential nectar of the Mahabharata, and it is spoken by Lord Krishna himself, the original Vishnu. Gita Mahatmya 5. So we're reading today from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse, who knows? 5. Oder? Weißt du, was gestern war? Kannst du kurz schauen? Es sollte ja nicht 5 sein. 9,7? Ist heute oder war gestern? Yesterday was 9.6. Okay, so today we're reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, the most confidential knowledge, text number 7. Please repeat. Sarvam Bhutani Kaunteya Prakriting Yanti Mamikam Kalpa Kshaye Punas Tani Kalpado Vrishyami Aham Sarvabhutani Kaunteya Prakritim Yanti Mamikam Kalpakshaye Punastani Kalpado Vishyami Aham. Word by word. Sarvabhutani, all created entities. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti. Prakritim, nature. Yanti, enter. Mamikam, my. Kalpakshaye, at the end of the millennium. Punaha, again. Tani, all those. Kalpado, in the beginning of the millennium. Vrishyami, create. Aham, I. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create them again. Purport. The creation, maintenance, and annihilation of this material cosmic manifestation are completely dependent on the supreme will of the personality of Godhead. At the end of the millennium means at the death of Brahma. Brahma lives for 100 years, and his one day is calculated at 4,300,000,000 years, out of earthly years. His night is of the same duration. His month consists of 30 such days and nights, and his year of 12 months. After 100 such years, when Brahma dies, the devastation or annihilation takes place. This means that the energy manifested by the Supreme Lord is again wound up in himself. Then again, when there is a need Okay, then again, when there is a need to manifest the cosmic world, it is done by His will. Bahushyam. Although I am one, I shall become many. This is the Vedic aphorism, Chandradogya Upanishad. He expands himself in this material energy, and the whole cosmic manifestation again takes place. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyanangyana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sriyuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Namo Prabhupada Priyadasaya Jagannatha Yatrananda Murtaye Bhakta Sugaya Krishnot Kirtanena Nrisinghe Narakshataye Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaivacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Panchatatvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktashaktikam Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matirgati Matsarvasva Padam Bhojo Radhamadana Mohano Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Garadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again the verse. Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya Prakritim Yanti Mamikam Kalpakshaye Punastani Kalpadho Vishramyaham. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create them again. So, Kalpakshaye and Kalpa Ado. Kalpakshaye. Kalpakshaye means at the end of time, at the end of one big cycle, and Kalpa Ado at the beginning of the next cycle. And this is a very interesting, very important also point to understand and to explain to people when they ask about the validity of Vedic culture or Bhagavad Gita, Sanskrit texts, about our philosophy in general. Because one of the big questions, in science is how everything began, how long does it all last, how long has it been here? And of course, there are all kind of different ideas and different estimations at how long this creation is here, or when this creation was made, when was it manifested, and also how it manifested. So I'll start by historically. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita, according to our traditional understanding, was spoken over 5,000 years ago by Krishna to Arjuna. And even more in the back, within the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself reveals that at the beginning, he spoke this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita to whom? To the sun god, Vivasvan. So Prabhupada calculates, I think 2 million years ago, something like this, or even more, 200 million years ago. Something like that, an unimaginable figure, when we think maybe there were some dinosaurs only on the earth, no humans in sight anywhere, Nisingiri Bhagavan ki jai. But one of the main aspects of Vedic culture is that they deal with very big time frames, very large, big time frames, which at the beginning might seem, especially when the first Westerners encountered, this descriptions, they thought this is just all fantastical imagination, nothing to do with reality. So when they first encountered, Indian, cosmology and the yuga system, and the cycles that are described, and if you read the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatam in this 18 volumes Srimad Bhagavatam, we still have one set of Srimad Bhagavatam under this table. We are still looking for the fortunate soul who will take this Bhagavatam before the end of the marathon. If somebody's inspired, you come to me, I'll give you the Bhagavatam. And in this Bhagavatam, the time scales and the stories that are described, they encompass an unimaginable, huge time frame. Sometimes many, many different yugas. Sometimes it says in different days of Brahma. So, or maybe even a completely different manifestation altogether. A different Brahma altogether. So this is, very difficult to. It was very difficult to comprehend, especially for the people who first encountered Indian tradition in the 17th, 18th century. Actually, the very first batch of Westerners, they were mesmerized. At that time in Europe, there was the Romantic era, just before Baroque and Rococo. This time was the Romantic era. Europeans were very, dreaming, and fantasy was a big, part of, culture and mainstream, you could say, imagination. And they were mesmerized, about all the amazing information you could find in the Vedic text. And many thinkers of that time, famously Mark Twain used to say, that India and its ancient cities, it's, I forgot the exact line, but it's something like older than history, the mother of civilization, and so on and so forth. In very amazing, praising and noticing, that the cradle of civilization might be a little bit further east than usually thought, because usually, for most Western understanding, the cradle of civilization is where? The cradle of civilization. Cradle is, a cradle is where you have a baby. So the cradle of civilization is where the beginning of civilization was. So where is the beginning of civilization according to the Western imagination? Sumerian, Mesopotamia, like modern day Iraq. But many thinkers started realizing, actually, the descriptions of India and the civilization of India, and especially the amount of text, is incomparable, actually in India. But then very soon the bias changed very dramatically, and the perception was that this is all just fantastic imagination or nothing to be taken seriously. Nothing related with reality, basically speaking. And the reason is very simple to understand, because if you go back in history, only around, let's say, 200 years, maybe 300 years, what was the Western understanding of the age of the world? Who knows? Yeah, everything, the world. Yeah, so the general idea was, it's around 5,000, maybe 6,000 years, This is the age of the whole world, So if for you have to imagine, you come as a, very proud, conqueror, or trader, you come to India, and you're convinced from your worldview the world is around 5,000, 6,000 years old, That's more or less the age of, Adam and his sons and his descendants, all put together. So very simple. And then you come to India, and then you hear, Brahma's day, 12 hours, is 4,300 million years. 4.3 billion years. 12 hours of Brahma. Then you're like, what? So it's, it's like in Australia they do like this, It's way above my head, It's like, what is this, It must be some imagination, some, the fertile imagination of the Indians, Probably they were drinking too much somarasa, taking too much ganja, and that's why they, had this, fantastic ideas, Then, within a very short period of time, this idea changed very dramatically. I once read this, history of how the Western world started, questioning itself. It was part of the Renaissance already, and then different, scientists, started estimating, well, it must be older, It must be much older, And then the first guesses were a few 100,000 years, and then some daring, scientists, went into the millions, And then the figures started becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And very soon the figures did not seem too fantastical anymore in comparison to, or they say like the Vedic figures do not seem to be so fantastical anymore in comparison to the modern figures. So that's a very, very important and interesting point to be conscious of, that the Vedic civilization, or you could say the Indian mind, the Vedic tradition, the remnants of the Vedic information, always informed the people who, believed and adhered by this tradition and civilization that the world is very, very, very old. But beyond that, there's one much more important point, actually. Because one thing is to have an idea, of when everything began and how old it might be. But even more important is the idea of cycles. Because in many ways, the Western idea of time is still very much grounded in the idea of everything having a beginning and then an end. So everything is very linear. Everything begins at one point, and then that's the end. And because of this idea, we also, we tend to apply this idea to everything, including to ourselves. That's your birthday, and that's, your death date. And that's it. It's the beginning and the end. That's it. But in Vedic calculation, the emphasis is much more, you could say, actually it's very obvious everyday observation. Time is always repeating itself in cycles. The seconds repeat themselves, the minutes repeat themselves, the hours repeat themselves, the days repeat themselves, the moon cycles repeat themselves, the solar cycles repeat themselves, cosmic cycles repeat themselves in, huge time frames. We know, like, I don't know exactly what cosmic cycle is going on right now, but probably something Aquarius or Pisces, And these cycles, last for hundreds or thousands of years, huge cycles. Or different planets, take many, many decades, to go around the sun. So, yeah, many big astrological cycles take place, and they're all reoccur. So these cycles, like the stars as we have them now on the sky, tonight, is, I don't know, what day is today? Is it waning moon? I think the moon is becoming smaller again now, after after Purnima, after full moon. And so the exact, this, when the moon is waning, at this time of the year, when the sun is traveling, more to the south, less in the north, that's why it's colder here. And the star constellation that we have today will reoccur again in the same way in God knows how many thousands of years, So all, and some cycles, reoccur more often. Some constellations are very, very seldom, And astrology and astronomy deal a lot, with understanding, those cycles and how long they last. And also the Vedic tradition actually relied consistently on that. If you read the Mahabharata will generally not use a calendar in that sense that it will say, so many years before Christ, But they say, when this constellation was in the sky, in this month, that's when this happened, So actually a lot of the dating of the Mahabharata is based on that, You can actually try to, nowadays it's very easy. You can just take a computer program and recreate the sky, when this constellation actually was in place. And then you can see, okay, this cycle reoccurs every 72,000 years, So on the last time it took place, it was maybe 5,300 years ago. So that's when, I don't know, Dhritarashtra spoke to Vyasadeva or something like that. So, like that. So we have to understand that the Vedic calculation of time was very, very elaborate. India was not at all backwards. I think now is the real bell. Maybe not. Yes. Nisingade Bhagavana ki jai. We can say it a few times, no problem. And Nisingade Bhagavana ki jai. The Vedic civilization was very advanced with numbers. You know, the numbers that they used to use for time calculation are very, very big. So we generally, in the Western world, we count with years, then centuries, millennium maybe, you know. So generally we only use those three, you know, years, centuries, and then maybe millennium, you know. I mean, one millennium changes to the next and, you know, everybody thinks the world is going to go under, you know. 1,000 years ago that happened, and, you know, 20 years ago as well, you know. It's like, oh, the millennium is changing, the whole world is going to be destroyed. And the same thing happened 1,000 years ago. Everybody was sure, you know, it's the end of the world, 1,000 years, you know. But in Vedic calculation, they have much bigger areas. You know, we have the yugas. So the yuga cycles are huge, you know. So the yuga cycles are, you know, each one double as, the Kali Yuga is, if you take Kali Yuga as one unit, then the previous Yuga is double as long. The Yuga before that is 3 times as long as Kali Yuga, and the first age is 4 times as long as Kali Yuga. No? That's the proportion of the Yugas to each other. And all the 4 Yugas combined are 4.32 million years. And then we hear in the Bhagavad Gita and also different texts that this Yuga cycle, this Divya Yuga cycle of 4 ages reoccur 1,000 times in a day of Brahma. So in one day of Brahma, 1,000 Kali Yugas reoccur. And only once in a day of Brahma, Krishna appears. Once in a day of Brahma. So actually, you know, we are pretty close to Krishna. You know? We barely missed Krishna, you know. And even more narrowly, we just missed Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you know. You know, once in a day of Brahma, in 4.32 billion years, you know. 5,000 years is not so much, you know. So we are quite blessed, actually, that we can read the Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, you know, fairly recently, you know, after they actually descended. So, yes, but we'll go a little bit further because Prabhupada is just talking about it, and the verse that Krishna gives is exactly about this topic. So, this is one day of Brahma. One day of Brahma, so 12 hours of Brahma, 4.32 billion years. So, 24 hours of Brahma, so I mean the 12 hours of the night as well, are 8.64 billion years. 8.64 billion years. 24 hours of Brahma. And during the day is the manifest creation, and during the night, most of the planetary systems are actually in dissolution and destroyed. And only the upper planets, Maharloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka, and Brahmaloka, Satyaloka, they remain. You know? The remaining part of the universe is actually annihilated. Every day of Brahma, there is a partial annihilation. Brahma lives 100 such years. So you can calculate, you know, 8.64 billion years times 365, that would be 1 year of Brahma. And then times 100, that would be the whole lifespan of Brahma. And that is more or less 315 or 311 trillion years. 311 trillion years. This is 100 years of Brahma. And this is one Mahakalpa. And this is the biggest time unit in Vedic time calculation. So that's pretty big. You know? So also very interesting, recently also Advaita Singha was talking about this topic. Of course we know, because Krishna is saying here, At the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature. Krishna is saying that. So of course Krishna is talking about Mahavishnu. You know, this topic is actually probably maybe 4 times in the Bhagavatam. If you read the Srimad Bhagavatam, in different sections of the Bhagavatam, this topic is addressed again and again and again. The whole description of, you know, Mahavishnu, Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, you know, Antaryami. So the manifestation of these 3 levels of Paramatma. You know? And you could say the Paramatma, the super soul of the entire cosmic manifestation, the material cosmic realm, is Mahavishnu or Karanadakashaya Vishnu. Karanadakashaya Vishnu, Mahavishnu, is the soul of the entire material creation. So the material creation sometimes is described to be like a cloud covering 1/4 of reality. So reality is eternal. You can imagine it like an expanse in all directions, but still 1/4 of that reality is covered by a cloud, and within that cloud is Mahavishnu. And Mahavishnu is the soul that animates the entire cosmic material reality. So this material reality, this cloud, is also an energy of Krishna, Daivi Maya. Krishna says, Daiviyesha Gunamaya Mama Maya Duratyaya. This energy is very difficult to overcome, but if you understand that it's my energy, then you can very easily leave it behind. You know? It's his energy. And Mahavishnu, it's described, he just glances over this material energy and animates it, impregnates it with living entities. And then there's, very detailed descriptions of how the Mahatattva, the undifferentiated nature, gets into action. First time comes in, then the modes of nature, and then all varieties manifest. So this is the beginning. Vishnu exhales. So on his exhalation, Mahavishnu is lying in Yoga Nidra, in a cosmic slumber, and he's just manifesting all these material universes, unlimited material universes. In Chaitanya Charitamrita it says, there are as many universes as mustard seeds in a big bag. You know mustard seeds? Small mustard seeds, black. Maybe in the kitchen, some of the kitchen helpers, maybe one time you throw one of them to the floor, and then you're like, oh my God, if you want to take each one of them, you will be there for a few hours. So imagine a whole bag. So it's difficult to imagine, how many universes. So many universes. So therefore, there is not just one universe, the universe. Scientists also speculate about the multiverse, multi-universes, many universes, So the Vedas certainly, think and talk about it as well, since a very long time. And we even hear descriptions how each universe might be of a completely different nature, Each universe is increasingly more complex, we also hear. Our universe is ruled by Brahma, who's Chaturmukha Brahma. So Chaturmukha means 4-faced Brahma. 4-faced Brahma, because that's the complexity of this universe. He requires 4 faces, 4 heads, 4 brains, you could say, to manage, this universe. But there are universes where Brahma has many more heads, dozens and thousands and millions of heads, according to the complexity of that specific universe. So we can even fathom, or imagine, how complex other universes might be. And all of this is manifested on his exhalation. So the exhalation of Vishnu is 50 years of Brahma. So the life duration of Brahma, we just heard before, is 311 trillion years. So exactly half, so more or less 155 trillion years, is the exhalation of Vishnu. And that's, 50th birthday, noon, you could say, that's the middle, And then Vishnu inhales again all the universes. Now is the real bell. Nrsimha Bhagwan ki jai. Jai. So on his exhalation, everything is manifested. And on the 50th birthday of Brahma, everything is manifested. From this 50th birthday onward, everything is withdrawn again. And that's the first line here. At the end of the millennium, Kalpakshaye Punastani. Everything is drawn back to my nature. So Vishnu then inhales everything. For 50 years of Brahma, for 155 trillion years, Vishnu is inhaling. Everything goes back into his nature. And then everything, all the living entities, all the Mahatattva, all energies, all the elements, all the elements described in the Sankhya Yoga, 24 elements, they all go back into and merge into the body of Mahavishnu. So like that. The highest time unit is one life duration of Brahma. It's one life duration of the entire universe, which is just an exhalation, an inhalation of God. So that's very impressive, if you think about it. It's maybe not the first thing you tell somebody in the street on book distribution, but it's certainly, there are many scientists who realized, this absolute, incredible descriptions, how much they actually are in line and in tune with scientific understanding that has developed more and more. In reality, we could say, and that's also the perspective Prabhupada takes, is that because in the Bhagavad Gita also, in the 12th chapter, Krishna acknowledges that you can actually realize truth by speculation, by study, by jnana yoga. It's just a more rocky path. It might take quite long. So it's not that scientists cannot understand reality. If you really, engage your energy and time to really analyze and try to comprehend the world, you will understand more and more what's happening in reality. So from our point of view, they're getting closer and closer to what the Vedas, described long ago. So because one of the other, of course, important, interesting topics is the Big Bang. The Big Bang. Everything exploded, at one point. And since then it's, combining, mixing. There was so much time, they say, like Radha Krishna was talking, there was so much time that it was enough time for, life to be created by chance. So that's one theory. But what many people don't know is that there are quite a few competing theories actually about how everything started. It's not only the Big Bang theory, it's one of them. But one of the more accepted theories also, it's the white dwarf theory, which is not too different. It's more or less like that. The idea is that at the beginning of a cycle, so it's also a cyclical idea, everything is compressed into this white dwarf. So this white dwarf is compressed energy. Everything is compressed into this small white dwarf. Dwarf, just to indicate that it's very small and compressed. And then this, when the compression limit is, reached, then it starts expanding, and then it expands and it expands and expands and expands and expands and expands, until it reaches its, absolute maximum expansion capacity. They speculate that, for example, the different stars like the sun, luminous bodies in the universe, they will become much bigger. They say that our sun, for example, will become much bigger. Will swallow the entire solar system, will become huge and red and burn everything. So when that level of expansion is reached, then it compresses back again, back to the white dwarf. So, and this is occurring again and again and again and again. So, of course, if you're from the West, you might use this analogy of a white dwarf. In India, they talked about yoga, nidra, Vishnu, Mahavishnu. It's the same principle, the same idea, that everything is compressed, everything is drawn into the body of Vishnu. Everything, all energies, all elements, everything is compressed, and accumulated within the nature of Mahavishnu, who's lying in Yoga Nidra in a cosmic slumber, completely detached of the material reality. He's just animating. You could say Mahavishnu is the super soul of the entire material reality. And then on his exhalation, everything expands again. So it's the same principle. Nothing new, you could say, actually, for somebody who knows Vedic tradition. Okay, I'll stop here. Maybe there are some questions. Yes. There is actually, okay, so there's one book you should read, Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Lecremo. Well, there are many pictures going around about huge skeletons. Many of them are fake. Probably most of them are fake, but the ones you see on Facebook probably are fake. But actually, there are findings about much bigger living entities. But a very important point is to understand the scale also. There's one such story in connection with Bali Maharaj. I forgot the exact circumstances, but you know Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj is whose grandson? Prahlad. Prahlad's grandson. Virochana, is the son of Prahlad, and then Virochana's son is Bali. So Bali Maharaj is looking for gold, and he finds this huge, gigantic gold, Goldada. How you say in English? Like a gold field, like like this gold, ring. And I forgot who tells him, somebody's like. He's like, wow, I found some gold, And then, I think his name is Brahma, I forgot who, but somebody tells him, yes, that's the ring of your great-grandfather. So that was Hiranyakashipu's ring, And, Bali is already just a few generations further down, Bali was amazed at this gigantic, gold, that he found. So the proportions in the Vedas certainly suggest that there is a drastic decrease in size. And we hear the story also in the story of Muchukunda, very famous story. Krishna is fleeing. Krishna generally, loves a good fight, But one time there was this very kind of like low class, kshatriya, he wasn't even worth the fun, So he just decided to make a different lila, and he just run away, run shore Krishna. He just escapes from the battlefield, as if he was scared, So Kalayavana was his name, So he became very, you coward, I'm going to kill you. So he's running after him, And Krishna is running into the mountains, and then Krishna enters into a cave. Actually, this cave is near Badrinath. Basically, it's going up the past Haridwar, Rishikesh, Alakananda, Ganga, Bhagirathi Ganga, and then going up to Badrinath. There's the Muchukunda cave. So all the way up to the Himalayas, Krishna ran, and Kalayavana behind him, trying to catch him. So Krishna entered into that cave, and he was hiding inside of that cave. Then Kalayavana came afterwards, and he saw somebody huge sleeping there, on the floor. So he kicked him. He thought it was Krishna hiding there. But actually it was Muchukunda. Muchukunda was a famous warrior, very, very famous, very, courageous, heroic warrior who, after fighting for many, many years for the demigods, the only wish he had left was, I need a nap. I need a long, long nap. And whoever disturbs me, I want to burn to ashes. That's the only wish he had, after fighting for so many years. He just wanted to take a nap, and he didn't want to be disturbed. And whoever dared to disturb him, he had the power to burn him to ashes straight away. So Kalayavana, kicks him. So Muchukunda looks at him and ashes. So, and then Muchukunda is, surprised, wakes up and then sees Krishna and offers prayers, Actually, he's a great devotee as well, but he was just, very tired, after fighting for such a long time. It's a very interesting interaction. I forgot the details of the conversation, but the point I'm telling this story is because Krishna tells him, yeah, you've slept very long, it's a completely different age now. Everybody's dwarfish now, the trees have become very, very small, Everything is very small, so you will be surprised. So the best is for you to don't go back into society, just, retire, meditate, and achieve perfection. That's more or less what Krishna said. And that's a very interesting point because, of course, it might be a little bit like fantastical maybe, but I mean, our scriptures are very fantastical. If you read the Bhagavatam, it's incredible, what's described in there. Some things we can correlate with, like, especially time calculation and cosmology. There is some very, very interesting correlations, but many things are beyond our, ability to correlate, to conceive of. But especially about those tree trunk, the trees having shrunk dramatically, and also many descriptions in the Bhagavatam about gigantic, huge, immense cosmic trees, Somehow, I don't know, some 3-4 years ago, somehow I came across a clip somebody shared with me, and it was talking about petrified wood structures across the world, Many petrified structures across the world, because we know that wood, after many, many years, solidifies and becomes silicon, becomes basically glass or stone. In Atacama Desert in Chile, we know there's like a whole forest in the middle of the desert, petrified wood, And there are many structures, you can research a little bit about it, that look like gigantic tree stems. They look like mountains to us now, but actually from the structure of, the shape they have, and especially the capillary structure, because we know that wood has channels where the sap, is traveling upwards, against gravity, This is the capillary quality of wood. Just put a piece of wood, and if you put it with the right side, not the lengths, the long fibers, but with the cut fibers, you put it in water and it would just suck the water up. This is the capillary. So this capillary structure, you can find huge trees, huge mountains. It's rock, but it looks like capillary structures. So that could be one, you could say, archaeological evidence. I don't know if there's, I think Devamrita Maharaj also dealt quite a little bit with it. There's this book called something like Finding the Lost Vedic Civilization, and he also, deals with these topics. But this is a very interesting one, because it literally looks like a huge tree trunk, quite a few, especially there's this, they call it the Devil's Rock or something in America, very famous. Redwood trees also we have, of course. Trees can get very old in general. Trees are the oldest living entities on the planet. Some olive trees in Greece are 9,000 years old. And the redwood trees, on the west coast of America, they are also 2,000-3,000 years old. So they were there, when the Roman Empire, was just starting. Some of those trees in the redwood forest were just a small sapling, So it's amazing, how old entities actually can get. So, like that. Okay. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.